Hi there, this is Jonathan Kemmerer with the American Meishan Breeders Association. This is a follow-up to the first video I made about the history of pigs in China and how pigs were traditionally raised in China. So here we're going to be looking at the unique physiology of the Meishan pigs and how indigenous Chinese pigs adapted to the way in which they were raised. So namely, we're going to be looking at how they do with a higher fiber and lower protein diet, how that typically affects pigs and how it affects the Meishans a little bit differently. So typically when you increase the fiber in a pig's diet, it's going to slow down their rate of growth, blocks their ability to digest protein, energy, and many parts of the feed. So in this article, it says that every time you increase the fiber by 1%, it decreases the ability of the pig to digest those things. So for example, if you have a standard 4% fiber, 16% protein, and you increase that fiber to 7%, it's going to feed more like a 14% protein instead of a 16% protein because that extra fiber is blocking the digestion of protein. However, it's been noted that there are several breeds, typically these traditional breeds, that seem to do much better on higher fiber. And this has been pretty widely debated and not well understood until more recently. In fact, if you look specifically at the research on Meishans, there's a lot of research that shows they don't actually digest fiber better than other pigs. In my opinion, this is going to be the best study on this subject. This was published, I believe, in 2010 or 2011 by Pedro Uriola and Hans Stein. This is out of University of Illinois. The reason I like this study best is because they compare different types of fiber. And in the intro to this study, they reference all the other studies that showed how the fiber blocked the rate of growth for the Meishans, but what they point out is that it really depends on the type of fiber. So the way that this study was done was they used 3 different groups of pigs. They used Meishans as well as Yorkshires at 4 months and Yorkshires at 5 months. The reason they did this is they wanted to compare Meishans to a commercial breed that were both the same age and the same size, and see if age versus size also made a difference. So they took these 3 different groups of pigs. They had the control, which was fed just a standard diet, and then they had 4 different experimental groups. And in the experimental groups, you can see here they substituted 30% of the diet with dried distillers grains, and another 30% of the diet with soybean hulls, sugar beet pulp, and pectin. They didn't really measure the rate of growth of the pigs on these different diets. They fed them on these diets, I believe it was about 14 days. And it was really just the digestibility that they measured. So looking at the results, the numbers here are just for the dried distillers grains. In fact, the Meishans didn't do better with a higher fiber diet when it came to the soybean hulls, the pectin, and the sugar beet pulp. They did marginally better. You know, if you look at like the difference here between the lighter York and the heavier York, is about the difference that you saw with the Meishan and the Yorkshires. Maybe a couple points better, but not much better. However, with dried distillers grains, there was a big difference. So looking here, for example, at the crude protein, when they substituted 30% of the diet for dried distillers grains, the Meishans were still able to digest over 80% of that crude protein, while the smaller York was about 67% and the heavier York at 70%. And across the board, the Meishans were digesting more of their feed. It's also worth noting the difference just within the Yorkshire, that the larger Yorkshires were digesting a little bit better than the smaller ones. And if you remember back to my first video where it showed the diet of the Meishan pigs in China, and how they staged the diet, increasing the fiber as they got older, it seems like they kind of understood this, that the older and the larger the pigs are, the better they can deal with roughage. It's also worth noting that they were only on these diets for about 14 days. As we talk about the mechanisms, you'll kind of understand why. It's sort of a symbiotic process with microbacteria that break down the fiber. And had they put these pigs on a higher fiber diet longer, it's possible that the Meishans could have done even better. So this is being done through hindgut fermentation. There's some debate about whether or not this is the appropriate word. I've been told that pigs cannot do hindgut fermentation. However, what's going on is that there's a symbiotic relationship with microbial organisms, in the distal colon, which are converting fiber into volatile fatty acids, which, from my knowledge, meets the definition of hindgut fermentation. However, that is what's happening. It's not something that the pigs are doing. It's that their colon is a really good environment for microbiotic organisms, which are converting the fiber into volatile fatty acids that the pigs can actually digest. And it's been shown elsewhere in research that Meishans tend to have a more microbially rich hindgut. It's a larger hindgut, and for whatever reason, when they take measurements, you tend to find more species and higher populations of each species of these microflora that are breaking down the fiber. So in China today, they've actually created a couple of like modern breeds, essentially. So the Suhai pig comes from the Hai River pig and a large white pig. The Su Tai is made from bred from Chinese Uralian, from the Taihu, which is an ancestor of the Meishan pig, and a Duroc. They put these different genetics together, and then over the course of, as you can see here, up to 19 generations, they stabilize a synthetic line and essentially have a new breed. The idea is to have a leaner, quicker growing pig that has this hindgut fermentation or the ability to break down fiber. And I mentioned this because there's some really cool research on these pigs. This understanding of the microbiome has made leaps and bounds in the recent years. And with the pigs having not been in the facilities past about 2014, 2015, this research just wasn't being done when the Meishans were in the United States. So this is a study that was published in 2020. It's with the Suhai pig. They took 140 pound pigs and they basically increased the fiber in its diet. So rather than comparing pigs of a different breed, they used just the same breed that had this ability to digest more fiber. And they studied it on 5 different diets with varying levels of fiber. So you can see at the bottom there, lowest was 16.7% total dietary fiber, the highest being 24.11%. And if you remember in the earlier slide, typically once you get above 5%, you start seeing a slowdown in the rate of growth. And here with these 5 different diets, what they found was that there was actually no difference in the growth rate, regardless of fiber amount. Even at 24.11%, it didn't change the rate of growth for the pigs. However, they also took measurements on what was going on with the microbiome. They found that 19.1% was actually the best diet in terms of having higher microbial richness, basically having higher populations, more different species, and witnessing them perform more of these metabolic functions. What's interesting is that in this 19.1% group, they also found specific species, which I'm not going to try and pronounce, that have been shown to positively correlate with enhancing the intestinal barrier function and health profile of the hosts. So what it's talking about here is the gut junction barrier. Essentially, once they start getting this more active microbiome, it prevents the penetration of outside bacteria. So this can be mycotoxins in their feed. This could be something they're getting from drinking out of puddles. This could be strep bacteria that they're getting from other animals. But when they have this more active microbiome from a higher fiber diet, it really increases essentially their natural ability to prevent disease. I'll be doing a more in-depth talk about the inherent disease resistance of the Meishan pig. At this point, I'm kind of just focusing more on the diet stuff. But to me, it's really fascinating that their ability to digest more fiber in their diet is directly tied to this thing that's also sort of like a natural disease resistance thing. So as far as low protein goes, this is a really interesting study that was done in the UK. I believe this is out of the Cambridge Press in 2010. And they basically compared the large white landrace hybrid to the Meishan pig. And it's a really fascinating study, the way that they set it up. They basically look at the growth rates and the feed efficiency of these 2 different pigs on different levels of fiber, but then they also had one experimental group where they let the pigs choose their own protein level just to see how well the pigs could choose their protein level in order to have the most ideal diet. So here you have F1 hybrids of a large weight large white in a landrace. You have the purebred Meishans. These are weaned piglets. So the hybrids are 4 weeks old and the Meishans are 6 weeks old, again, using slightly different aged pigs so that they would have pigs of about the same size. The pigs were about 17 kilograms when they started. They fed them on these diets until they hit 34 kilograms, and that's when they stopped the experiment. So again, you have these two breeds, each of them on different diets. The low protein is going to be 13%, medium 20%, high is 25%. The idea is that the medium protein was what they considered the most ideal. So they wanted to see how they grew on less protein than what they thought was ideal, more protein than what they thought was ideal. And then in the fourth group, again, the pigs get a choice of high and low, and they want to see if they can actually balance their own protein levels. So after the experiment, they looked at how much they would eat from each of the two boxes of high and low protein, and they were able to calculate what the protein levels were that the pigs chose for themselves. So the F1 commercial hybrid type pigs, they self-selected a feed that was around 19 or 20%, whereas the Meishans actually preferred the lower. They averaged at around 14%. So basically they were just eating out of that low protein box all day and didn't really increase the amount of fiber in their diet. So here's the results. With the F1 hybrids, when they fed them less protein, they ate more feed. Their gain was lower and their efficiency was really poor. Middle protein was a little bit better in terms of the rate of gain and the efficiency. The highest efficiency was actually the highest protein, even though it didn't create the most growth per day. And then their choice of diet actually seemed to be the best in terms of the gains per day and their conversion efficiency. So the numbers I'm looking at here, in the left, you have how many grams per day they ate. The middle is how many grams per day of weight they gained. And then on the right, you're looking at the conversion, which is sort of like a percentage. So it's, that first box there, 0.442, that means for every pound of feed they were given, they gained 0.442 pounds. These are really important numbers for pork producers. And in terms of how you value it, that kind of comes as a personal thing. As feed becomes more expensive, you're going to look at the conversion rate. But as feed is more cheap, you're going to look at the gain per day because that's less time before you can turn over a profit on the pigs. So looking at the Meishans here, likewise, when they were fed less protein, they ate significantly more feed. However, unlike the commercial pigs, they actually gained really well on that. That was one of the highest gains per day of any of the experimental groups, albeit it was the lower conversion rate. As they increased the amount of feed that the Meishans were given, they chose to eat less of it. They gained with really good efficiency. You can see there the high protein, 25%. They're consuming significantly less, only about 1,200 grams per day, but their conversion is actually about the highest. However, the diet they chose for themselves, the 14%, conversion was almost as good as the high protein, and the daily gain per day was actually significantly better. And again, these are weaned piglets, only 6 months old. So I think this is really illustrative for us as breeders of Meishan pigs, because I think we're typically encouraged to feed really high protein to young pigs. And here it looks like that may not exactly be necessary. So another thing to look at, this is another study from 2021. This was done on commercial pigs. So it's a 3-way cross of a Duroc, Landrace, Yorkshire. Basically, they fed them different protein percentages in their diet and found that as you decrease the protein, you're going to increase the microbial activity in the pigs. So to me, that's really interesting when you look at how the pigs were traditionally raised in China. So again, this is that table from the first video. This was a feed guide published, which back in the middle part of the 20th century in China, they had universities finding the best farmers in the different regions and then teaching those methods to other farmers in order to increase the productivity of the local peasant farmers. So this chart likely would have come from them studying some of the better pig farmers in the region. And so you can see here, the diets were actually pretty high in protein when the pigs were pretty young. However, they looks like they would have gotten a pretty good amount of fiber. So why they chose to do this could be complicated. But if they're feeding more fiber, that 20% protein to a young piglet is not going to feed exactly like 20% protein. And I showed you in those studies that the Meishans can digest certain types of fiber better than other pigs. But if you remember, the pigs were 4 to 5 months old in that study. They were, 130 to 150 pounds. I think if you did the same research on weaned piglets that were only 6 weeks old, they probably wouldn't have that much of an ability to digest fiber. But as you can see, as the pigs get older, they're dropping the protein and they're drastically increasing the fiber. And it seems like the pigs are adapted to do better at this. And as they're dropping the protein and increasing the fiber, you're increasing the microbial activity of the pigs. And that's going to increase the pig's natural disease resistance, which it's going to need if it's being raised in close quarters like this. And it's actually going to produce significantly more manure and significantly more active, microbially active manure, which, considering that these pigs were used to produce compost, is going to drastically increase the quality of compost that the pigs produce. If you remember back to the first video, the delegation showed that the pigs in China were producing about 3 times as much manure as pigs in the United States. And that is one of the effects of feeding significantly more fiber to pigs. So this picture comes from I think it's the London Times newspaper in the 1860s. And it describes pigs that were shipped over from Japan, but a Chinese origin. And it says that the pigs were fed on the ship like cows. And as you can see, these pigs are not in great condition. And this is what pigs are going to look like when you feed them like cows. And I say this as sort of a caution that, we have data about how the pigs were traditionally raised, but the way in which an animal was traditionally raised doesn't mean it's the best way. They may be adapted to this in the sense that they'll do it better than breeds that are not adapted to this, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be the best way to raise a pig. Well-balanced diets, nearly all pigs are going to do better on. However, what a well-balanced diet is may be different because of these genetic adaptations. And at the same time, I think it's fair to say that a diet that is developed for a lean commercial pig may not be the best diet for Meishan pigs. It seems like we can definitely alter the diet a little bit, substituting more rougher kinds of byproducts, lower quality feeds, certainly cutting some of the protein in order to feed the pigs with a little bit more economic efficiency. Feeding pigs in this way could also eliminate or greatly reduce the need to medicate them if it is making them more naturally disease resistant. And it shows how Meishan pigs, in my opinion, are one of the best pigs when it comes to having a real genetic basis for doing more forage-based or feeding pigs on alternative feeds. And most importantly, this is why we keep these pigs around. The way we understand the world is always changing. Agricultural practices are always evolving. Economic demands are changing. And the breeds, their genetics, these are tied to practices. And the variety of practices we have the opportunity to do is really hinges on the genetic basis of the animals that we work with. It was part of why I showed you the studies on like the Suhai and the Sutai pigs, is that this could really make its way into commercial production. And the more breeds that we lose, the more potential we've lost to improve or adapt or change our farming practices over the years. And not even just farming, but pigs are used for a lot of valuable medical research. Pigs being mammals similar to us, they study pig hearts. And even with the Sutai and the Suhai pigs, some of the research that they're doing on the microbiome of these pigs are related to the microbiome for reasons of human health. So that's why I think it's just so vitally important that we keep these pigs around. So thanks for watching. If you want to get in touch with me, you can reach out to me through my website, oddbirdfarm.com. If you want to get in touch with the American Meishan Breeders Association, you can go through the website, meishanbreeders.com, or you can find all of us on Facebook, the page Make Mine Meishan, which is sort of a forum for people who are interested in raising these pigs. So thanks for watching today.